Welcome to Forthright on audio podcast. Last week's column, published April 18, 2024 in the Spokesman Review, was a preview of Earth Day celebrations occurring April 20th to 22nd, but there's still a few timeless points to be made on climate change. Herewith, a column and commentary titled by the editor, Knowing Your Place in the Universe on Earth Day. Earth Day is an annual reminder of our connection to the planet. How we define that relationship depends on where we see our place in the universe. What is our responsibility for the Earth, and how do we live it out? When the first Earth Day was celebrated in 1970, there were big human-centered problems to be faced, and they required big solutions. Most of the solutions were about not doing stupid stuff anymore, like not dumping so much industrial waste into Cleveland's Cuyahoga River that a spark from a passing train could set it ablaze. It caught fire for the 9th time in 1969. It was an embarrassing episode and caught the attention of Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson, who announced the idea for a grassroots environmental movement later that year. The movement figuratively caught fire, and Earth Day is now, quote, the largest secular civic event in the world, end quote, according to the Earth Day Network, celebrated on and around April 22nd by over 1 billion people worldwide. After the birth of the Earth Day movement, a group called Keep America Beautiful produced a now controversial public service announcement that played for a decade. If you tuned into a television set anytime in the 1970s, you saw a white actor playing the crying Indian in a canoe, a single tear running down his cheek as he watched American culture trashing the environment. It played into a couple of stereotypes about Native American culture. The National Congress of American Indians now controls the controversial ad and limits its use. Modern Native culture is more complex than wearing feathers and paddling about in birch bark canoes. But it also signaled a growing respect for indigenous knowledge that had been dismissed by early colonists, who interpreted the pre-existing North American societies as more primitive compared to Europe's technological achievements. They missed the connection between indigenous belief systems respecting the earth and the biblical calls for godly stewardship. And to be blunt, an industrializing America didn't live out its Judeo-Christian stewardship covenant with the planet. 50 years ago, Expo 74 was the first international exposition to focus on the environment instead of human technological progress. Before Earth Day, trade-offs favoring growth at the expense of the environment had led to expanding industries filling rivers and the air with waste. After Earth Day, large-scale government interventions were adopted to balance the corporate point source pollution that had been allowed to flourish. It was the right reaction for the size of the problem. There is an underlying tension in American politics between a belief in big government hegemony versus smaller government and local control. The belief in anthropogenic, human-caused climate change has been used to rationalize more and more control in the hands of centralized authority. Only government is big enough to hold the reins of a planet. But are those reins ours to hold? Since that first Earth Day, we've shifted the narrative about our place in the universe from man as part of an unfolding creation to man as an existential threat to the planet. Popular culture in the decades surrounding Expo 74 featured a 1927 poem by Max Ehrmann titled Desiderata. The poem shaped a generation of young boomers. Quote, beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. End quote. It's a far different message than today's generation is being fed, telling them it is their duty to save the planet and to be very afraid. By all means, celebrate Earth Day this weekend, not out of desperation over holding the fate of the planet in your hands, but because the weather forecast is pretty decent for Saturday. It will be a glorious day to be a child of the universe. Again from the Desiderata, a quote. And whatever your labors and aspirations, in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. End quote. The column went on to note Spokane Earth Day events from the Spokane River Keepers. They were having a pickup trash day along the river for a couple of hours at Highbridge and Peoples Park to keep the river beautiful. And the Lands Council was hosting Earth Fest at Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge, celebrating Mother Nature with more than just tree planting was their tagline. So, and I hope that some of you folks were able to take advantage of those events, or at least to get outside those 2 days. So when someone emails me directly with reader feedback, I always reply directly, and I thank them for being a reader and for taking the time to write, respond to whatever points they make. And if I read their email in a column and commentary, I won't use full names unless I expressly ask permission. I do respect their privacy. Response on social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, or by letter to the editor, are different. Those are the traditional route for reader feedback, and they are very public choices. The following letter to the editor was sent in by Heidi Peterson of Spokane. Heidi is apparently a climate alarmist who is convinced the Earth will end without humans controlling climate change. I'm going to provide a response after I read her letter. It included quite a large chunk from the column as a quote, and so here's the letter, which the editor titled, "We All Need to Be Concerned." From the letter. Once again, Sulani Madsen manages to twist words. This quote from her April 8 column, quote, "It's a far different message than today's generation is being fed, telling them it is their duty to save the planet and to be very afraid. By all means, celebrate Earth Day this weekend, not out of desperation over holding the fate of the planet in your hands, but because the weather forecast is pretty decent for Saturday. It will be a glorious day to be a child of the universe." End quote. And then she goes on. "We all need to be increasingly concerned about this planet, primarily because the rhetoric we have been fed since the first Earth Day hasn't been effective in creating the changes needed. And while thinking the universe is unfolding as it should, perhaps that unfolding is in actuality increased concern, action, protest, and yes, even being very afraid." So that sounds a bit alarmist. And Heidi, your beliefs are a product of a narrative that you've been fed. The greatest impact humans have had on the climate is 10,000 years of agriculture turning over the soil and reshaping the surface of the earth. Climate has gone through cycles for eons prior to the industrial age, driven by factors that obviously did not include whether or not humans used fossil fuels as a source of concentrated, portable, and reliable energy. And yes, I realize the counter argument is that the rate of change in this cycle is speedier than in past cycles. That's still a debatable point among scientists, even if it isn't a profitable point to bring up if you're trying to make a living as a scientist. Just ask Dr. Judith Curry. There's a link to an interview with her on the Substack post, and there are others like her. What has changed is our attitude towards nature. Both Judeo-Christian and indigenous belief systems have been abandoned. Our industrial era culture has adopted a mechanistic worldview where man substitutes for God, assuming both a responsibility and a control that is not ours to grasp. We no longer work from the hypothesis of creation as the product of a creator, as a complex whole of marvelously adapted and adapting systems and creatures. The larger universe has cycles of change from the sun outward through the galaxies. The Earth is an ever-changing planet with cycles of temperature and climate above and geological plates in motion below, and not some stable, constant stage set designed or involved, take your pick, for the human species. The only climate crisis to fear will be caused by our failure to adapt. It is still a glorious day to be a child of the universe. Take time to subscribe on Substack for email notification of new content, whether you make a pledge or not. Again, working forthright is like I'm the street musician busking with my instrument case open. If you find value, if you are entertained or educated, or if you just find it invigorating to have an argument with the podcast, feel free to drop a few dollars in the case. Thanks for listening.